Hello and welcome to Contain Cyber Threats in Less Than 5 Minutes with ReliaQuest and Google Security Operations Platform. Now, today's exciting webinar is sponsored by Google Cloud and ReliaQuest and produced by Actual Tech Media. My name is Jess Steinbach. I'm with Actual Tech Media, a future B2B company, and I'm so happy that I get to be your moderator for this conversation because this is my absolute favorite style of webinar. We are dropping the slides, we are stepping away from planned outlines, and we're just talking. Think of this as maybe a short, information-packed coffee break with two incredible experts and all-around fascinating humans here with us today to talk about this incredible partnership and how it can help you solve some of the security operations problems that you are probably facing in your organization. And not only that, but solve these issues quickly, efficiently, and at scale. So that is a lot of reasons to be excited, and I am going to get our expert presenters on out here with me in just a moment. But first, I want to go through a few quick housekeeping points to help you get the most out of our time here together today. So let's start with a little bit of a guided tour of your webinar console. If you haven't been with us before, welcome. And if you've been with us many times before, you already know where I'm going. We're going to head over to the questions tab. Let's start with some highs and hellos. Let us know how you're doing today. Give a wave to the community. I see all you wonderful folks chiming in, and I love it. That makes me so happy. So keep those highs and hellos coming. Now, this questions window is also the best place to get involved and get interactive as we go through our session. Our speakers, as I said, we're going to have this nice, fast-paced, punchy conversation, but they absolutely want to leave some time for questions with all of you at the end. So make sure that you are getting your questions in as we go through our day together today. Now, that questions window is also the best place to reach out and let us know if you do have any technical issues. I hope that doesn't come up today. Every once in a while, you know, tech gremlins get on the system, right? So if the gremlins have got a hold of you today, here's your step one. Step one, browser refresh. I promise you a browser refresh is going to clear out most of the usual little hiccups that can happen in a live event, right? But if you try that browser refresh and it's not working for you, shoot us a message there in that questions window and our team will be there to help you out. All right, so we started in the questions window. We did our highs and hellos. We are ready to get all our important questions in. Now let's go one hop over to the handouts tab. The handouts tab, absolutely chock full of cool resources and takeaways. So make sure you spend some time with that today. Questions, handouts, check. What's our very last stop on our tour today? You're saying to yourself, it's prizes. Today at the webinar, you could win a $250 Amazon gift card that we have as a prize giveaway at the end of our session. Now, of course, you do need to be here in live attendance in order to win, and all of our winners must meet the Actual Tech Media prize terms and conditions. If you are not sure what those T's and C's are, no problem. Do you remember that handouts tab that I was telling you about earlier that's full of all kinds of great information? It also has the full terms and conditions waiting there for you. So head on over to that handouts tab, click in, scroll down, and you will find those T's and C's waiting for you there. Okay, my friends, well, that is it for the housekeeping. That's a lot of information we covered very quickly. And luckily, the information is not stopping there because we have two incredible speakers joining us for this wonderful roundtable conversation that I cannot wait to get into. So let me introduce you both to, or to all of you, to both of our wonderful speakers, Mike Hom, Product Architect and Portfolio Lead Chronicle, Google Cloud, and Jason Pfeiffer, Chief Strategy Officer at ReliaQuest. This is an absolute rock star duo. I cannot wait to jump in. In fact, I'm going to stop chatting. Let's get Mike and Jason on out here with me. Just one moment. We'll get them on camera with me. All right. Well, Jason, Mike, thank you so much for joining me here today. I am really pumped to get into this conversation. Jason, I'm going to hand things to you to start us out. I want to know what you are excited to get into with our audience today.
I'm excited to tell the audience about how we're helping customers together between ReliaQuest and Google drive that mean time to contain down to sub 5 minutes. It's a problem I hear a lot of customers talking about. They're confused with their limited budgets, limited resources. Do they go MDR? Do they go XDR? Is that the right solution to the problem? And I think really they have to think beyond that. And how do they use the power of two world-class platforms to get to the point where they can drive the mean time to contain and respond to threats to sub 5 minutes?
I really like that point, and kind of, are we even asking the right question to start? Sometimes we get siloed and it's this or it's this, and we're taking a step back and there's a larger question here. And with any of those questions, we're always trying to address a problem, right? That at the root, we have an issue that we're trying to solve. So Jason, maybe I'll kick this back to you again. Let's talk about the problem that folks are trying to solve and maybe what the major pain points are that are causing them to ask those questions in the first place.
Yeah, I talk to a lot of customers, big, small, large enterprises, small enterprises, multinationals, et cetera. But it always comes back to a few things from my perspective.
Hmm.
One, there's too much noise. They're getting inundated with alerts from a lot of different technologies, a lot of different capabilities out there. They don't know how to prioritize and figure out what's what and where they need to start. Two, their technologies are disjointed. They have data all over the place. They have different technologies in different cloud and on-prem environments. They're trying to figure out a way to investigate and respond to things when they're trying to get all the right data just to tell the right story of what they actually need to do to validate that threat. Is it real or is it not? And so they spend too much time actually trying to figure out how to do the plumbing, how to get the right information, how to sift through the noise than they actually do than doing analysis and actual cyber activities. Mike, I'm curious to what you're seeing.
Yeah, I think there are two main things that I would also point out to pile on to what you've mentioned. There's kind of the analytical scale piece that you've mentioned, right? So for every analyst, what is their overall capacity to address every threat that comes in, every alert that comes in? What's the investigation process? How long do they have to do that? How long do they have to engage in a case? Maybe, an escalation to an incident that they have to respond to, so on and so forth. The investigation process can be very time consuming depending on what you're dealing with. And so, one of the things that we often index on is how do we scale? How do we 10x the analyst to get more for every piece of activity that they're doing? How do we make them more efficient? And that's a big problem space that we have to deal with. I would say that the second thing that many security teams are contending with is this concept of managing security risk. And furthermore, the sort of bigger picture piece here is how do they work with their executive leaders? How do they work with both their executive security leaders as well as their business leaders to talk about how that security risk translates into business risk? And so when we then think about speed to outcome. That speed to outcome is an important component to basically saying how do we mitigate security risk and how does that overall help drive down the risk to the business, if you will.
Mm.
Yeah, I love that speed to outcome, and I think too you hit the nail on the head too on the kind of consistency, right? How you do the investigations in a timely manner, excuse me, and then do it at scale, right? And then I think also doing it consistently. I did a thing a while back when I was running security operations for a large organization, and I said, hey, here's the same investigation. I gave it to three different analysts, and I told them each to kind of go and get me the outcome, do their complete investigation, and I got three different answers, and I got them done in three different ways. And so I think that's one of the interesting things about trying to do something at scale is how do you make it repeatable so that
Yep.
way you're getting the same outcome each and every time. And that's really hard if you're doing it from a human led perspective. And I think a lot of people spend and over rotate a lot of time on that.
That's right. I would say that in closing, before we move on, certainly, your point about consistency and repeatable processes is critical. I would say that if I had to up level to the three most critical points of, how we can scale analysis, security analysis in general, it would be that you have to be metrics driven, meaning that it has to be measurable. You have to
Yep.
show the work, so it needs to be observable, and ultimately that consistency piece requires the activity to be relatively repeatable. So measurable, observable, repeatable.
I
Hmm.
love that. I love that. We're all security folks, right? So it's like trust but
That's right.
verify. Right? You got to show the work.
That's
So
exactly right.
love that.
And I think what you're hitting on with a lot of this is if we need to move fast, Jason, where you started was we have these complex systems, and a lot of times that happens where the need is quick and evolving, and so people just sort of and stick that solution on, and stick that solution on, stick that solution on. So what I'm hearing from you, if there's an organization out there that is feeling like they've created this sort of Frankenstein's monster, and they don't even have the insight into the full extent of all of it, is that sort of replicatable? Is that consistency? Is that one way to sort of create those connection points and avoid these sort of stuck on elements that they don't even fully understand? Is that what you're getting at?
I think absolutely. Yeah. I think you got to be able to leverage the data where it exists and, you try to get everything into one single data lake or data set if you can. But I think you have to be able to leverage the best of what you need from an organization to be able to get the outcomes that you're looking for. But you have to be able to do it at scale. Right.
Right.
And, that's the hardest part, I think, is a lot of people spend too much time on that plumbing versus actually doing the analysis. And maybe they're not leveraging the right platforms to get them to that right outcome. Right.
Well,
Agreed.
okay, that's a perfect transition, because speaking of leveraging the right platforms, we have you two here talking to us today about Google Cloud. We've got ReliaQuest, and we've got this wonderful partnership. So I'm wondering if we can talk a little bit about how ReliaQuest and Google Cloud SecOps have joined forces to tackle this. And Mike, maybe you can kick us off from our Google perspective here.
Yeah, I think foundationally, what we're offering is a data intelligence platform that has, three key dimensions that we really want to touch on today. I think the first one is that we believe in this concept of intelligence-led security operations, meaning that from the ground up and from the top down, the entire platform and all of the workloads are driven through a series of, either intelligence or I'm sorry, intelligent modeling, data modeling from the ground up. From there, we believe in encoding, high quality data stitching, and early correlation on signals that are coming in, whether it's telemetry coming in, whether it's context data coming in. And then when we then put that data to work, right, we have all of our workloads that run on top of that. We have detection workloads, we have investigation activities happening, we have response operations happening, and then we also have reporting activities happening, right? Because at the end of the day, each of these activities have a set of, going back to being measurable, observable, and repeatable. You have to report all of this up, right? You have to identify gaps in your detection coverage. You have to identify where we're getting, either we're making progress, where there might be gaps in our investigation workflow. We even have to identify, where we're really winning on response operations, right? Where are we, automating a lot? Where do we need to fill in the gaps, so on and so forth. And so the point here is that we have, this intelligence-led security operations paradigm. The second thing is that we believe in scaling without limits, and what that really means in practice is that, you know, compared to other vendors, we tend to see, everything based off of a cost model, on like data ingest, for example, or the volume of data that you're bringing in and the license cost that kind of follows that. And while I think if we put pricing aside for a moment, our idea is that whereas some vendors might say 30 days is enough, we believe 1 year is maybe the baseline, right? For hot data, as an example in practice. This really makes a big difference when you're talking about, hey, for a given IR, the first 48 hours is the most important. But then after that, you have long tail analysis that you really need to get into. And for the practitioner, having access to data that goes a year back for understanding, hey, how long was the dwell time for this particular threat? That makes a big difference, right? And that really leans into this idea of if you can contain within 5 minutes, you want to then be able to fully, scope out your investigation for the first 24 to 48 hours, and then you really want to extend beyond that. And so that's kind of the second dimension. The third dimension is what we mentioned earlier, which is AI infused productivity, and this is really to both assist and augment the analyst. And this goes back to this idea of 10xing the analyst, right? We're in this long-term journey, right, with AI to help folks, in every activity that they're engaged in, from crafting a detection, from going through, hunt development, right, and really saying, how do I build out that investigation, whether proactively or reactively? How do I get more efficient? More automation in, kind of like the everyday tasks that require a lot of toil, right? And then ultimately, when we then get into the respond piece, we want to be able to expand just beyond, automated playbooks, right? There's an actuation piece where sometimes you don't know what the surface is that you might need to really engage in, and so there's an exploratory, phase there that can really be, driven down and reduce in certain ways, right? So long as you have these AI agents who are doing some of that automated investigation and discovery for you in terms of actuating, a response surface.
Yeah, I think you just described nirvana for every like security operator practitioner out there in the wild. Haven't done it for a long time. I think everything you said, and it's why I love the SecOps platform, because I think you hit the nail on the head, from data retention to AI to using it to build the detections and hunts. And I think when you think about our better together story, right, it's like two in the box, right? With the SecOps platform with gray matter and our ability to do data stitching to help customers get the data that they need no matter where it exists, right? And so we know it takes time to move data sources into SIM technologies, and you have multi-cloud environments and a lot of complexity around political and retention requirements and things like that. But using that data stitching, which allows us to pull back that information and bring it into gray matter, into SecOps, when customers need it most for those investigations, is huge. On top of the automated alert enrichment, detections, and response capabilities of gray matter, combining those with SecOps allows us to basically make a turnkey solution that allows customers to get those detections customized, bespoke to their environments really, really quickly, lowering that time to value. And then layering on just the operational expertise, everything from implementation and migrations into SecOps to just the ongoing tuning, tweaking of detection rules, and then the investigation assistance all along the way provides just a much better outcome to the ultimate customer. Because I think you said it earlier, right? It's consistent and it's all about the outcome. And how do we get that customer the outcome? And doing that in a very consistent manner that's also completely transparent, right? And I think the biggest thing around AI that we're seeing now is you've got all these magic black boxes of AI. And I think it's one of the things that brought these two organizations together is our view that it needs to be transparent. And the transparency in our models and everything we're doing from the automated investigation and response perspective allows the end users, the security practitioners at enterprises all over the world, to see exactly what's happening, exactly why decisions are made, and exactly what decisions are going to be made next based on the data available. Wherever that data exists is huge. And I think that's really what makes us kind of a better together, two in the box.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Yep.
Well, and the coolest thing about, Mike describing Nirvana and paradise for us is that this is real, that this exists. This is a paradise that you can attain. And I want to ask you guys to walk us through some examples. And maybe Jason, I'll kick this one to you. What are use cases that you could explain to us, or examples that you've seen of this, in working for people?
I've got a handful. I think I've got over like 50 or 60 different customers that are in this box already, but I'll pick on two. One is someone in the finance and insurance industry. They were moving off a legacy SIM, I'll call it, recently acquired by a large networking company, into the SecOps platform. And basically, we're able to transition them completely into SecOps within sub 45 days. I think two, lower their MTTR, their mean time to respond, by 70% in that 45 days, and also reduce their false positive rate by 98%, all within 45 days. So you're talking about migrating from one SIM to SecOps, doing that with gray matter, doing it in sub 45 days, and then showing them the transparency, the time to value, and the mean time to respond, getting those automated response plays out there, and then also dropping their false positives. So their analysts, their folks can focus on things that are much more accretive to their business rather than just sifting through a bunch of noise and trying to figure out how do they get the right signal, if you will.
Yeah. I think one thing to add with what, Jason is talking about here is, again, just going back to the themes that we've been discussing, right? You want things to be both measurable, observable, and repeatable. And that speed to outcome, really starts mattering here. And I think in practice, when we talk about what's measurable, we talk about mean time to contain, but there's just so much more that has to happen in order to conduct an investigation. What does that investigation entail? How is it scoped? And then what the most appropriate set of maybe initial actions are, right? As well as follow-up actions to further the investigation, further the response, so on and so forth. And so for the fact that, we're basically getting from 0 to 45, taking, wholesale migrations from, one vendor to Google SecOps, it's really, really promising for many of our customers right now. And I think that's where, if we really take kind of like a holistic look at where the market is going, this is where the trend is going, right? Where we need to get people, for lack of a better way of putting it, we need to get them moving as soon as possible, right? Because the health of their organization really, really matters. And so, just to kind of close on this thought, I think, you have to look at this in terms of almost like a health, a wellness, and a hygiene perspective for the security org. And I think to the degree that, gray matter is getting these customers sort of like moving a little bit, almost like trimming the fat, if you will, on previous operations. This is a huge one.
Yeah, that's a great point, Mike. And I think it's doing that in the sense that we've done it across, almost thousands enterprise customers worldwide, right? Like it's proven, right? We don't use these response plays and automatic actions and things like that just in one environment. They're done across hundreds of environments. So they're going to work. They're going to work each and every time. They're going to be more bespoke to your environment, your customer base, et cetera. But it's going to work. So a lot of times there's a lot of this unknown and like, hey, to your point, you can't just go in there and do mean time to contain. You can contain everything, right? But if you don't understand how effective that rule is, if you don't understand how effective the data is that you have available to you and those types of things, you're never going to actually contain anything because you're going to be more scared about breaking the business.
That's
But
right.
when you have the actual telemetry and the metrics to back it up that says, hey, we do this across large financial organizations all the time, each and every time, and here's the impact, right? Then it's a much easier conversation with leadership across the organization, not just within security.
Yeah.
Well, you hit on, so at the start, we were talking about some of the problems that we were solving, and consistency, speed, and scalability, and certainly noise was where you started, Jason. And it sounds like in the example you just gave us, and really, hitting on that reducing that noise, and the impacts of that are huge, right? Because if your team is burnt out, you're going to see that effect in a lot of other places as well. So that's a really big ROI and kind of response there. Before I move on to looking ahead, I just want to make sure any other examples we want to share.
No, I've got another quick one. Large, I'll call them a logistics company, $9+ billion logistics company, right? Move forward with SecOps and gray matter. Wanted to get rid of the duplication. Wanted to bring down their mean time to contain. They were able to go from running no automated containment or response actions to running over 30, having 30 different rules running automated response and containment actions in under 90 days. And I think it just goes to show too the power of the two platforms, the year-long of retention that Mike mentioned earlier. I think the tried and proven automation with inside of gray matter and the transparency allowed them to do that in a methodical manner. And it sounds fast, like 90 days, and it is. But I think having the empirical data to the earlier points allows them to move much faster because it's not something they're having to build out each and every time, each and every use case inside their environment. They can take from the things that work across, both of our customer bases and make sure they're applying those in a meaningful, for a meaningful outcome inside their business.
Awesome. All right. Are you guys ready to get your crystal balls out? Are we ready to look ahead?
Sure.
We're getting close to the end of the year. I'm fighting it tooth and nail, but it's coming for us. So we're heading into 2025 as we kind of do that, looking back, looking forward. If there was sort of one thing that you would want folks to walk away from this webinar today, having that understanding of either, you can look back or you can look ahead into some upcoming trends. What would that one thing be? And I'm going to kick this to you, Jason, and then Mike, I'll ask you to add in.
What's that one thing in the year ahead? Maybe I'll make it two things.
Love it.
I think, one is like metrics. I think metrics are still going to be supremely important to security operations, right? To make sure that you're doing all the right things. If you can't manage it, you can't measure it, you can't manage it, you can't get better, right? So I think metrics are still going to be there across the board. I think too is the automation and containment is becoming like the new it thing, the new response action, if you will. And I think to organizations, for them to get ahead, they're having to move into detect, contain, investigate, respond. And I think that you're going to hear this DCIR framework going forward because there's no way to keep up with all these threats. They just keep coming at us, hot and heavy. So how do you detect things, immediately take some containment actions, then investigate them, validate them, and then ultimately figure out the right response action? Because that's the only way you're going to be able to stop, the impact and minimize the blast radius of some of these, emerging threats. So I think, we're well armed to do that with the measurements, with the metrics, and with the capabilities of both these platforms to help organizations drive to this new paradigm where they're containing threats as soon as things are detected while they do an investigation to figure out whether or not it's actually malicious or not.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Look, I think everything Jason mentioned is so deeply important, just fundamentally, right? The transparency piece matters, right? Scaling without limits, which, I'll just kind of plug in really quickly. I think is also so critical to shift the paradigm towards customer advantage, right? Because ultimately what we want to do is we want to shift that asymmetric advantage towards them, right? This is a tough business, and so I think being able to give every advantage to to a defender is just a foundational kind of like part of our philosophy. If I had to add some additional pieces for where I think next year is going, Look, I think I'll break it down into maybe three different ways, maybe two different ways. Sorry. First off, I think context really matters here, right? And so what I mean by that is um, there's been a little bit of a separation, if you will. Certainly, other people can use different words on this with uh, how security teams operated and how traditional IT operations teams have operated, right? In terms of taking network visibility, network topology, asset inventory data, so on and so forth. And oftentimes that has been kind of segregated from the security team, right? And this really speaks to, for folks who may not be in security, but they, deal in the operational availability of a network. This is kind of what I'm talking about. This is what I'm referring to. And I think there's now this trend of, I don't want to use the word reconciliation. That's probably like too bold of a word, but like I think, these teams are starting to kind of reunify, collaborate internally, so on and so forth. And I think it's deeply important that we support this trend because that type of information, that context data, is super critical to aiding security investigations, right? Aiding security detection itself, right? It's better when you're able to contextualize, hey, we see this point specific threat or this, chained attack or what have you. And we're able to contextualize it. And here's how maybe the initial access got in, and this is the type of machine or the device that this pertains to. We have, very clear records of, who spun up the device, who owns it, so on and so forth, because ultimately you want to use that for mitigation action, right? So I think,
100%.
I think that's the first thing. I think the second thing is, and I mentioned this earlier, is that this idea of risk-based analytics is going to be, probably one of the biggest trends that occurs over the next several years. Other vendors have also, made this a somewhat popular, trend to lean on. I think the concept itself is fairly universal. I think this is something that, many companies have desired, whether they were able to, very clearly articulate this or not, almost doesn't really matter, right? It's the fact that the industry is finally moving towards this in a fairly unified fashion. And I think that's both very positive for everybody, right? But also the implementation of that matters, right? And again, just kind of going back to some of the key pieces that we talked about earlier, this needs to be measurable, right? So being able to measure the risk all the way down to the events and all the way back up to the security risk, of your environment posture, how that translates to the business really, really matters, right? I think that's number one. You need to also be able to show, kind of like how you got here. You can't just say, well, the risk is, I don't know, I'm just making this up, but the risk is yellow, right? Without really showing, like, is it really yellow? How is it just yellow? Does it break up into red in some places? Does it break up into green in other places, right? And there's like this level of simplicity that matters, but there's also this level of detail that you really need to also be able to dive into, right? And this is where we're headed, right? With both ReliaQuest, the gray matter platform, as well as the SecOps platform. And then I think, the third thing here is, again, just driving towards the themes, these first principles, of also being, I'm sorry, not observable. I already mentioned that, of repeatable, right? You need to be able to say, I can reliably point to the process that led to this risk being articulated, this risk being expressed. This is how we can generally trust this risk that's being presented to us, right? And I think between all three of those, that will also further this, this idea of giving good the advantage, which has been our byline, since we first got founded, right? So I think that's where I'll close with for the time being.
Love it. Love it.
That was a lot of really great takeaways from both of you. And I know that you've given the audience a lot to think about because our questions tab is just piling up. And so we have a lot of questions to get into. Now, we wanted to keep our conversation short and sweet and packing a punch today. So we are a little short on time. Are you guys okay if we stick around and answer just a few audience
Sure.
questions?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right,
Yeah.
let's get into it. I'll dive right in. I'm going to start with this one here because you guys brushed alongside AI a couple of times, and obviously, we can't have a conversation these days without getting into AI. So I think I'm gonna ask you to kind of zoom in a little bit here. Question from the audience: ReliaQuest, you talk about AI detection and automation. Google SecOps also has AI detection and automation. What's the difference, and then how are they working together? I know we brushed against this, but can I ask you guys to kind of dig in a little bit more on that?
Yeah, I can jump in and Mike, keep me honest on the SecOps side. I think there's a lot of things about the offerings that sound similar, right? Between whether it's AI or threat intelligence or detection content, but I think I go back to the two in the box, right? And if you think about like SecOps has detection content, ReliaQuest and Gray Matter has detection content, and theirs is great, and they have really good stuff around detecting threats, and we have really good stuff around detecting threats. And the same thing with AI, right? And if you think about the AI models, the way we use AI, our AI is built on our cyber analysis methodology, or what we call our CAM, but it's how we've been doing investigations for years and years. It's how we've trained our AI model based on like 10 to 15 years of cyber investigations, doing this for customers globally for that long, and taking the output of all the investigations that we know over that period of time and training our models based on that data, and based on the outcome that the customer ultimately provided to us. So that's what's honed in our models, making them they're completely transparent. So you can see with every decision that's happening every step of the way, they're based on the artifacts, the IP addresses, the host names, and how we do these investigations. But basically walks the customer through. It's like, hey, we have this new IP address. How prevalent is it? How is this? How is this? Answering all these questions about the investigative process based on all the data we have available to us, whether it's in SecOps or outside of SecOps, and driving that investigation, also driving through response plays or additional questions. So if we don't have access to certain parts of data, they say, hey, if you had access to this type of data, you may want to look at and try to answer these different questions all along the way. But the whole goal is to get to the ultimate outcome, and ultimately tying it in too with SecOps AI to help the customers get smarter and get faster. I think Mike mentioned it earlier, right? It's a speed game, and how do we do it reliably and consistently across the board? And so that's how we've built our AI, is based on all that data, trying to get customers to the outcome, to get them the investigation faster so they can make a business decision of how and how fast they need to respond to those particular threats.
Yeah, no, those are great points, Jason. In terms of what we're doing in Google SecOps, I'll just say that, we kind of index on two main dimensions, right? We're trying to assist the user and we're trying to augment the user. And so with Gemini for SecOps, I'll just kind of list off a few examples to illustrate what I'm talking about, and then I'll sum it up. The first one is within our search interface, we have a powerful Gemini interface that basically allows you to perform natural language query generation. Okay, so you can basically ask a question. I'll just give you an example of like, hey, find all outbound network connections over port 443, and then tell me, show me which ones had an alert associated with that particular event, right? This is built into the product, and this is really meant to enrich and really, I think, accelerate the efficiency of a user who might be early to the platform, or who might just say, hey, look, I'm very familiar with how to craft queries, but ultimately, like, I'm in the middle of an IR, just like I don't want to think about it. Let me just get into this as quickly as possible, and then I can sort of work within the results. I can tune the query, so on and so forth, right? I think that's one way. The second way is that we also do natural language query generation, and then we convert that into our YARL detection logic, right? So where we can generate a rule from that query. I think that's exceptionally powerful because you can run these queries and then you can say, okay, I need to deploy this query as a rule. I need it just to be running, sort of consistently over all new data that comes in, and that will allow me to then basically get results without having to constantly rerun this manually, right? Maybe these don't feel super, super high tech, but these are things that drastically reduce toil for our users, right? But the main thing that I feel is very powerful is how Gemini helps our users make sense of the data so that they orient around the results. And so we have Gemini also doing things like summarization, pointing out some of the things that Jason also talked about, which is like, what are some of the statistical outliers within some of the results set, right? What are some of the basic statistics that customers care about? What was the first seen, last seen? What was the earliest observation for certain entities or devices, assets, so on and so forth, that are of interest during an investigation. These things are super important just to help get people from 0 to 1, so to speak, so that they don't have to go through the toil of figuring all this out themselves. And that alone reduces a lot of that mental sort of like cycle waste that generally occurs during the investigative and triage process, right? And so that then leads into some of the response pieces, where we have Gemini basically helping with playbook development. We have certain cases where it's suggesting, hey, like you might want to take, this action or define this action within the playbook, so on and so forth, right? And so there's a lot there that we can certainly unpack and and an even deeper answer. But just at a high level, those are kind of some of the pieces that Gemini for SecOps is doing. And I think just to up level here, when we then talk about assistance and augmentation, this is what we talk about in terms of trying to 10x the analyst and ultimately trying to really drive task efficiency for them.
Mhm.
That was a great answer. You guys crammed a lot in, and I was going to say we have to wrap it up, but you know what? I'm going to sneak in because I think this might be a quick and easy answer. I'm going to sneak in one more audience question. We have a wide range of folks here with us today, a wide range of industries and different size organizations. We did have someone ask, what's the ideal customer look like? What would you guys say to that?
Jason?
Yeah, I mean, I think we work with customers across all different verticals, all different sizes. I mean, I'd say probably more to like the small to large enterprise is probably best. They can leverage all those capabilities. But if you've got a cyber team doing security operations and you need support, I think it's you're right for the solution. And I mean, if if you have an existing platform and you want to migrate to something more cutting edge, you're right for this as well. And I think it doesn't matter where you're based globally or in the U.S. Makes no difference to us. We have customers all over the world that we're working with jointly. So I think it's really a fit for anybody who's looking to upscale their cyber operations, do more with less, and get to cutting edge outcomes.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more, right? Like Jason said, we fit pretty much almost any org size across almost any vertical, right? And I think with ReliaQuest, their gray matter platform and Google SecOps, they just need to come talk to us and see what works.
Okay, Mike, that was the perfect segue. You nailed it. My next question, my final question for you both. How do we continue this conversation? How do we reach out to you guys after we wrap? And what do we do as we're walking out of this webinar here to learn more?
Yeah. Definitely two main things, right? Head to our marketplace. You can, visit a website, cloud.google.com/solutions/ReliaQuest. We'll certainly have that link available for the viewers of this webinar, and then reach out to your sales rep.
Love it. Jason, any last thoughts from you?
No. Appreciate the time. Appreciate everybody joining and appreciate all the thoughtful questions.
Well, my pleasure. This has been a lot of fun, guys. Mike and Jason, I want to thank both of you for joining. Now, before you leave us, I do want to say to everyone in the audience, I know that there's a lot of questions that we haven't gotten to today. We are going to make sure that all of those get sent to the ReliaQuest and Google Cloud's team, so you will get responses back to those. So keep those questions coming in. Jason and Mike, truly a fascinating conversation. Thank you so much for coming to chat with us today.
Of course. Thank you so much, Jess.
Pleasure.
All right. And if you are looking to learn a little bit more right away as we walk out of the webinar today, make sure you visit the handouts tab. We were talking about that at the top of the webinar, full of some great resources. And that website that Mike was just talking about is linked right there in the handouts tab. So make sure you've clicked on that, got that tab open before we leave today. I promise you will want to spend a little bit more time digging in and exploring this incredible partnership as you head on out of the webinar today. And you've got all these cool thoughts kind of bubbling around in your head. So open that tab right now. But before you leave, we also have one more piece of excitement for all of you out there, and that is our prize giveaway. We have a $250 Amazon gift card going to someone who is here live and present and a little bit lucky at the webinar today. And that special someone is Wendy Boots from Kentucky. Wendy Boots from Kentucky. Wendy, great name. Love that. Amazing. Perfect Kentucky. All right, Wendy Boots, congratulations on your $250 Amazon gift card. And as always, we will follow up with you after we wrap our webinar. So stay tuned for that. All right. Well, with that, on behalf of the actual Tech Media team, I want to once again thank Google Cloud and ReliaQuest for making this webinar possible, especially to our incredible speakers, to Jason and to Mike for joining us today, for sitting around this virtual coffee table and diving into this conversation. Both of you have given us so much to think about, lots to explore, and just a really interesting conversation. So thank you so much for joining us. Now, as always, my biggest high five, my biggest thank you goes to all of you out there for coming and being a part of this discussion today. I know that we covered a lot in a very short amount of time, and there is clearly lots more to explore. You know, each one of these questions that we got into, each one of the answers that we got from Mike and Jason, we could probably spend an entire webinar on. So I hope that this is just the jumping off point. I hope that you're going to spend a little time, you know, mulling these ideas around and kind of kicking those thoughts around, maybe chatting with your teammates and colleagues and sharing those concepts after we walk out of the webinar today, and keep that discussion rolling in your own days. I would love to hear how that's going for you. I'd love to hear where you go from here. And either way, I know it will be a fascinating and interesting day. Thank you so much for coming and being a part of making my day a little bit more interesting as well. I know that I've learned a ton, and I've really had a lot of fun with all of you today. I hope that I get to see you all at a webinar again soon. And until then, have an absolutely beautiful end to your day. Thanks all.